Manival, managing editor of the Williamsport Sun-Gazette, and we are pleased to welcome Josh Shapiro, the Democratic nominee for governor of Pennsylvania, for an interview. Mr. Shapiro, what measures should the state pursue to foster job creation in rural and suburban Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, Mike, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I think it is critically important that we grow our economy and create jobs here in the Commonwealth. And I think we need to start in our schools. And what I mean by that is we need to bring vocational, technical, and computer training back to Pennsylvania high schools. We need to show 10th, 11th, 12th graders they can be a welder, a computer programmer, an electrician. And then we need to give them a pathway to success and opportunity through apprenticeship programs. We actually invest less in apprenticeship programs today than Governor Casey did decades ago in the Commonwealth. The reason why I think this is so important is if you want to bring manufacturing back, if you want to have an all of the above energy strategy, as I do, you need to make sure that you have the workforce ready to do those jobs. And we have to begin by training them in high school. So that's one piece of it. Second is I think we have to pay particular attention to rural communities that have been oftentimes really just forgotten and left behind. And as I travel across rural communities, they're desperately in need of broadband at high speed and affordable prices. We're going to build that out during my first term as governor and make sure that those dead zones, those spots, businesses, homes that don't have access to that internet will. And we need to ensure that the Commonwealth's investment goes not just to our cities, but goes to those rural communities as well. I also think it's critically important that we focus on the unique needs of rural Pennsylvania, including our agriculture sector. I've talked to so many farmers, and we've got a lot of small and mid-sized farms in Pennsylvania. And a lot of these farmers want to expand their operation. They want to buy a new piece of equipment, whatever the case may be, but they don't have access to capital. So I'm going to begin a rural capital fund that allows farmers and other ag companies and entities to be able to get access to capital to expand their operations. And that will help them create more jobs as well. And then finally, I think you need to make sure that the Commonwealth makes it clear that we're open for business. Right now, our taxes are just too darn high when it comes to our businesses. So I want to reduce our business taxes. It's known as the corporate net income tax. Right now, we have the second highest corporate net income tax in the nation, and I want us to be amongst the lowest. And so I want to take us from 9.99%, which is what the tax is today, to 4% by the year 2025. And I believe we can do that and work together in a bipartisan fashion to get it all done, to create a good tax environment, to have capital available, to invest in our infrastructure like broadband, and to invest in our workforce beginning in high school to create avenues of opportunity.
What concrete steps can the state government take to promote apprenticeships or other entryways into careers in the trades?
Well, as I said just a moment ago, right now, there really isn't a pipeline between high school and these apprenticeship programs. Oftentimes, students need to kind of stumble into that program, or they really need to know what they want to do. That's rare. It would create more avenues of opportunity if we teach our high school students, the foundational work of the trades. Again, for example, being a welder, being a plumber, being an electrician, whatever the case may be. And then make sure they know when they graduate that they can go right into a funded apprenticeship program to hone their skills and get out in the workforce. We know that Pennsylvania apprentices, that is, Pennsylvanians who go through those accredited apprenticeship programs, earn 30% more throughout their lifetime of wage earning. We should make that more available to Pennsylvania students and workers.
The state's budget for 2022 is $45.2 million. What single state program should be the top priority for elimination or reduction in spending, and why?
Yeah, 45 billion, not million. That's look, I think I'm going to employ a similar tactic to what I did when I led Montgomery County, which is Pennsylvania's third largest county. And there we did something called zero-based budgeting, where instead of taking the budget from the year before, just adding a few bucks onto every program, we actually sat down. And the theory behind zero-based budgeting is you begin at zero and you build your budget back up. So rather than just assuming every program, every initiative works, you actually force those who work on those programs to defend the initiative, to show the efficacy of it. And I'll tell you what, Mike, in some cases, those initiatives require a lot more investment, as was the case for us in Montgomery County. And then in other cases, we completely eliminated those programs. And that's the approach that I want to take at the state level, reimagining, rethinking these programs to make sure they actually work, that the taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely. And I have a proven track record on this. If you look at what I did in Montgomery County, we actually, as a result of doing zero-based budgeting, Mike, we cut spending. And we actually had the lowest taxes in the entire region. And furthermore, we earned a AAA bond rating, which is the highest level of approval, if you will, from a fiscal perspective. So I'm no stranger to getting a fiscal house in order, to making sure that the dollars that we take from Pennsylvanians are spent wisely, and that they can see where their tax dollars go. In Montgomery County, and I'm sorry to lean on that so much, but I think it answers your question directly. We also created a website to provide total transparency for how the dollars were spent. So if you contributed $1 in taxes, we were able to show you that dollar coming in and then also show you where that dollar went out. Now, Mike, you might not agree with the choices we make, and I respect that. But I think it's critically important that you and every other taxpayer knows that your dollars are being spent appropriately and wisely. And of course, we can have arguments, and I mean that in the most respectful way, over whether or not it's a wise program or not, or what have you. But I never want a taxpayer to think their money's being wasted or not properly spent or invested. And that's why I think that transparency portal is really important.
Which single state program or obligation is most underfunded and why?
It's very hard for me to kind of arbitrarily sort of say that sitting here. I can tell you there are areas I'd like to invest more in. For example, I think a lot of our rural and urban schools, for example, have been chronically underfunded. I'd like to see more resources go into those schools. I think we need to put more resources into policing. I have a plan to hire 2,000 more police across Pennsylvania. And so I think we need to put more money into public safety. And going back to the first question you asked me about economic development, you heard me talk about investing more in apprenticeship programs, for example. So I think there's some areas we want to make sure we invest in, whether or not they're, I forget exactly how you said it, Mike, whether or not they're undervalued or underfunded. I think it's just an area where we need to invest more, and that's my viewpoint.
What one change to Pennsylvania's tax system would you most like to see?
I'd like to see us reduce our corporate net income tax. That's the tax that all businesses pay. It's the second highest in the nation. And right now it's 9.99%. And I'd like to see it dramatically reduced to 4% by 2025. That's more aggressive than even Republicans have been calling for in the legislature, but I think it's necessary in order to stimulate economic growth.
What should an American history course in a public school in Pennsylvania look like?
Well, it should teach history. I'm not sure I understand where you're going with that, but we should make sure our kids are learning history and making sure that they're learning science and math and all the other subjects. I want to make sure that it's effectively taught. I also think it's really important that we have parents involved in setting that curriculum. And so I'm the only candidate who has called for the appointment of at least two parents to our State Board of Education. And Mike, our State Board of Education is the entity that sets the standards that each school district, we have 500 school districts, that each school district uses to establish its curriculum. So I want parents directly involved in establishing the standards for curriculum here in Pennsylvania.
what would you say is the most critical environmental issue confronting our state, and what should we be doing to address it?
You know, there are a multitude of challenges when it comes to the environment and public health. You've seen me take a lead as Attorney General on prosecuting polluters, people who violate our laws. And by the way, every polluter I've prosecuted has been convicted, has acknowledged their crimes. So I take very seriously the laws of Pennsylvania and making sure that they're enforced. I think it's also clear that climate change is real. My opponent calls it fake science. It is not. I mean, I think it is fair to have different ideas on how to address it, but it's obviously the science. And the question is, what is leading to climate change and how can we help address that in Pennsylvania? The number one driver of greenhouse gas emissions in Pennsylvania are orphan wells and mines. I've toured them in the northern tier and northwestern part of our Commonwealth. They're all across Pennsylvania, but those are the areas where they're most concentrated. And these are wells that are actively leaking methane. I mean, you can literally go take a Zippo lighter made in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and light it next to one of those orphan wells, and a big plume of fire goes up. So I want to cap those nearly 500,000 orphan wells and mines. It's going to put a whole lot of union trade workers to work, and it's going to do a lot to protect our planet without sacrificing jobs. If anything, it's going to create.
Pennsylvania is still plagued with a backlog of untested rape kits. What should the state do to correct this?
Well, this is an area, not within my purview as Attorney General. And in fact, the former Auditor General, Eugene D. Pasquale, kind of sounded the alarm on this issue a few years ago. We applaud him for it. This is something that is going to require more resources, which I'm prepared to put in my budget in order to address the backlog. And as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I can tell you it is critically important that these rape test kits be prioritized and be processed quickly.
Could you please name one policy or proposal by former Republican Governor Tom Corbett during his administration that you appreciated, and why?
I worked with Governor Corbett closely on the transportation and infrastructure bill. I was one of the people that obviously crossed party lines to work with him. I thought it was critically important. And I think it speaks to the fact that throughout my career, I've always worked across the aisle, bringing Republicans and Democrats together to get things done. And so I'll continue to do that work with my colleagues in the legislature on the other side of the aisle. We have to come together to address these challenges. And, the issues I talk about every day aren't particularly partisan. It's investing in our school kids, hiring more police, growing our economy, cutting taxes. I mean, these are things that I think enjoy broad bipartisan support. We need to work together to get it done.
And our last question today, can you tell us about some of the priorities you would have as governor that our questions didn't touch on today?
I'm not sure. You want me to speak about an issue you didn't raise? I want to be responsive.
Yeah. We're giving you an opportunity here to talk about some of your priorities, some of the things that you would like to do as governor that weren't necessarily addressed by our questions.
Yeah, let me focus on energy because I don't think we spent a lot of time speaking about that. I think it's really important that we have what I call an all of the above energy governor, someone who wants to focus on both protecting the jobs in energy that we have today, but also creating the energy jobs of tomorrow, which are obviously green energy jobs. We are so uniquely focused here in the Commonwealth with our natural gas and other energy opportunities to be able to really be a national leader and to be able to create both a nexus between our higher education institutions where we need the skills developed by graduates there, our building trades and others, to be able to come together and do the jobs of today and tomorrow. So I think energy is an area where you will see me invest a lot of time and energy, no pun intended, to really focus on creating a lot more jobs in that space.
We here at the Williamsport Sun-Gazette thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time to answer some of our questions.
I'm always happy to answer your questions. I know as AG, I've always been pleased to answer your questions and the reporters from your other papers. And I'm going to continue to take the question. I think it's really important that a leader be accountable to the people. And one of the ways we do that is through the media. Understand my opponent has refused to answer questions from the local media, which is unfortunate. I think it raises a question, frankly, as to what he's hiding. But nevertheless, I'm always happy to answer your questions and appreciate your time today. So thank you.